Message today, first session that we are doing, Ben Barber, who is the CEO of Inovonics. How do I say that? Where is Ben? I'll say it wrong again. I apologize. And he's going to do a session on RDS. And let me give you kind of the pre of why I wanted to do this session with him. And he's also doing a session on processing, which Rob and I talk about all the time. Processing is the biggest thing that, one of the biggest items you need to have on your station to make it sound good. Again, Calvary Chapel, we want to sound good. We want to be excellent for Jesus. We want to raise the bar in radio. We don't want to sound like the canned station. We want to sound, this is what I tell everybody, I want to sound as good as Caleb, but have better content. That's the reality. They have a lot of money, right? They have a lot of good equipment. Their stuff sounds really good. Yeah, but I want to be that, but have the verse by verse, chapter by chapter teaching so we can feed people. So part of making Calvary Chapel Radio better each year and excellence is something that I've been wanting to focus on my own station, kind of the last piece of equipment that I wanted to get, even though Bill Lukeman will say, you never have one last piece of equipment, you're always getting new equipment, which is RDS. And this is the reason why I think that it's important eventually for each one of us to have RDS in our station, is that for the most part, people are listening in their cars. Your overwhelming majority of the people are going to be listening to your radio stations in the car. That's why we focus on billboards, and Tom Culler can tell you a lot about billboards as well. But billboards are great because people are in their car and they can see that and tune into your station. But the other thing is, because most modern cars now can scroll information from your station, I really think that it's a benefit to be able to, the person in the car, see, hey, listen, I'm scrolling the name of the pastor that is on. They're not going to remember that phone number that is given out, although we give it out, right? They're not going to remember that, but they're going to see that. It's a visual. Okay, this is George Small and his radio program. And over the next couple of days, we're going to show you some guidelines to help out, and we want to kind of change some of the production and how metadata is done so that when it's on the car radio, it streams and it looks good. Again, making Calvary radio the best that it possibly can. That has been my goal of kind of taking a leadership role in the conferences and getting it going. Just want to see it better. And so Ben, and I'm just thankful that Ben is here. I mean, to have a CEO of a radio company, that's pretty neat, isn't it? And he was here last year with us at the Calvary Radio Conference. And so I said, Ben, listen, I got a great idea. Let's install an RDS system into our station, and you can do screenshots as you go along to show the installation of it and how easy it is. Now, listen, normally we would not promote one particular piece of equipment. Everybody got that, right? That's not normally what we would do. But I will tell you, the 732 that Ben is going to show us, it took all of 15 minutes to get it up and running. That's how quickly it was to get this technology. And I will tell you, we've already had people in the church come up and say, Pastor, thank you for putting that on. I never knew that guy's name. In the middle of the program, right? 15 minutes into it, 20 minutes into it, it still is showing the name of the pastor that is teaching. And hopefully we're going to show you guidelines, the name of the pastor, the program that is name of, and then with a slash, the book that he is in, so people can know, oh, he's in Matthew chapter 22. And all of that is done through this single little rack space unit. And now some of you have Nautel transmitters. You can do that as well. It's a little harder to set it up, a little bit more complicated, but this is just a kind of a general how we can get RDS system going into our stations. And I know that you will be blessed by Ben's presentation. So let's welcome Ben up into the first session for Calvary Radio.
Thank you, Ron. Well, it only took 15, 20 minutes to set it up on Ron's station, but I'm going to take an hour and a half to talk about it. No, just kidding. Let's see if I can get this going. All right. Inovonics is how you say the company's name, one N. My name is Ben Barber. I'm the president and CEO of Inovonics. We've been around since 1972 in designing and building and manufacturing broadcast equipment. We will talk about the 732, but any RDS encoder will work. Yeah, I'm pretty sure any RDS encoder will do similar to what we did on Ron's station. So, real quick, Inovonics does three different products. We do audio processing, which we're going to do a presentation on a little bit later on Wednesday. We do monitoring and receiving, and of course, RDS encoding, and that's what this session is. RDS, what does RDS stand for? RDS stands for Radio Data System. In the US, RDS started in the early 70s, mainly in Europe, England, France, places like that, and that's where it got its roots. And when the US started to adopt it, US wanted to do some different things and have some very small differences from RDS. So in our wisdom, we called it RBDS in the US. Everybody calls it RDS, Radio Data System, so that's what we'll do. For you engineers and geeky people, real quick, we'll just do a couple of slides here. This is your audio spectrum of what you're transmitting. You've got over here on the left, you've got your audio, the voice that you hear. This little spike right here is something called a pilot, and that turns on the little stereo light on your radio. And then you've got L-R, you've got the stereo information, and then you've got this little thing right there, those two little humps. That's the RDS data that gets transmitted. The injection level, the amount of RDS data that you want to transmit is between 5 and 7%, and it's not very much, so it doesn't harm your audio signal. It doesn't make you sound quieter on the air. We're going to go through five definitions. I need to hold up all five, that we're going to talk about, and I want to define these and come back to them later because they're all things we need to talk about, things we need to set up. The first one is the PI code or PI code, and it's your program identification. In the US, which was one of the nice things that was done in RBDS, it's completely derived from your call letters. So it's a 4-digit number, hexadecimal number, and WXMB, so Ron's station, is actually transmitting 929D. KEAR transmits 1AA1. KLVM is 2F3A. And you're going, what does that all mean? Well, in this digital stream that's being sent out, every block of data gets that number, 929D. And we'll talk about why that is later, but it's a unique identifier that identifies your station based on your call letters. So some radios will actually decode that and put your call letters up. But it's more important for something we'll talk about a little bit later is if you have translators, it identifies your station as the same one being broadcast on a different frequency. The next definition that we need to know is PTY, and it stands for program type. And this is where the US also differs from the European standard. There's 32 numbers that identify what type of program you are. So if you're a rock station or a country station, or in our case, we're going to be either probably religious music or religious talk, then that will identify your station as that type of format. So if somebody comes into your area and wants to scan the dial for religious music or religious talk, then they can do that, and the radio will stop on your frequency. Someone like K-Love or Air One or something would be more religious music. If you're doing a mix or more speaking program, then you would probably identify yourself as a religious talk station. So that's the PTY codes. PS, program service. And this was originally designed for an 8-character field. And it was designed to identify your station, like BBC 3 or Live 105 or The B, or you might say WXMB-FM. It's 8 characters, and that's all it is. And originally it was designed to be static because every RDS radio will display this field. And usually when you tune to the station, that's the first field that gets displayed. So PS is program service. Then there's RT, which is radio text. Radio text is a 64-character field, and you can put longer messages in it, but you are limited to 64 characters. Older radios, car radios in particular, not all of them would display this, or you had to push a button that said info or text or something like that. More modern radios where you've got the larger LCD screen will display this, and usually it gets it all in one line. Sometimes if it's real long, it'll scroll across. But this is where you would put either your catch slogan or WXMB. The longer you listen, the later it gets. There you go. How's that? Your new slogan. Now playing Only Jesus, Casting Crowns, K-Love, or you might put your identification for your station, something like that. But the important thing is it's 64 characters, and older radios may or may not display it. Newer radios will. But that's you want to remember that field. The last field that we want to talk about is the alternative frequency field. And this is an AF list. So if you have translators, what happens is if you drive from one area and you're listening on a particular frequency, 101.7, and the signal starts to get weak, the radio will check those other frequencies in the AF list, and it will look for that pi code. And that's why you have to have a unique pi code. So it will look for that pi code and say, is that the same pi code as I'm listening to right now, as I'm receiving right now? And if it is, it'll change frequency, and all of a sudden the audio just gets better, and that's it. And that's all the user is going to notice. So if you have translators, you want to make sure to put in all your alternative frequencies in that list. So you could put in 101.5, 88.3, 90.7, and as you drive from one area to the other, it will check those frequencies and automatically retune your radio. So those are the 5 things that we need to, the 5 definitions that we need to know about for RDS. How do you connect things up? It was great. Ron and I were on the phone, sent him a unit, didn't send him cables, I was supposed to. Somehow those got out. But we were able to plug it in and get it all working pretty quickly. So this is the front panel view. It's got some LEDs on there for status. It has a menu screen, a knob, and then the back. And that's where things get a little bit confusing. You've got an input over here on the left. You've got 2 outputs, and then probably the other connector that you want to look at is your network port. And that just plugs into your network of your station over a Cat5 cable. There's a few different ways of hooking RDS up physically in your air chain. Here we've got your audio processor. Might be an Orban, Omnia, might be an Inovonics unit, somebody else's, that's fine. You can take the output of that, run it into the RDS encoder, take the output of your RDS encoder over to your transmitter. So you just break it and put it in line. The way we hooked Ron's up was we actually didn't break that line, this top connection, so it never went off the air while we were plugging it in. But we hooked it up to his pilot output and his SCA input. Don't worry about all that. Those are just the connections, and we give you a quick start guide on how to actually plug it in if you buy our unit. So this is how we hooked up Ron's. If you're a mono station, if you don't broadcast in stereo, then this is how most likely you would hook it up. You'd still have your audio processor here, your transmitter over here, and you just take the center output and run it over into an SCA input. And that's it. Real easy to plug in and get going. First thing you want to do once you get it plugged in on your network is you don't want to spend all day turning that little knob and trying to set up different parameters and everything through the knob. So you look at the screen, you go to the now playing, you go to the setup, you go to network, you go to IP settings, and this is probably your most important setting for getting things working. You want to have static IP set up. The difference between DHCP, which is dynamic, and static is that this box needs its very own number on your network because your automation system is going to be talking to this box and you don't want it changing, so you don't want it to be a dynamic number. So set your static IP, then you can set that IP address up right there, and then the next thing you want to do is to put that into your browser. Go to a computer, type that number, that IP address up here into your browser, and it'll pull up a web page in the unit. What happens first is you get this nag screen that says you're not broadcasting RDS. Even though you plugged it in correctly, you're not broadcasting RDS until you enter a valid PI code. And remember, the PI code is based on your call letters, so that you can go to this page, the RDS page. You don't have to calculate it or anything else. You just put in your call letters, WXMB, hit the save button, and you're done. So we've got the PI code set up and done. The next thing you want to do in our list of 5 things was set up the PTY code. And so we're going to set this to religious talk. Remember, there's 31 that you can choose from. This one is probably the most appropriate. The next thing we want to do is put in the PS code, or the dynamic PS. Remember I said it was an 8-character field that usually identifies your station. So we can put in WXMB-FM, and that will appear on the radio faceplate. Then the fourth thing to add in was the radio text. So you can put in a default message is a great place to start with your catchphrase, your slogan, whatever you want to put in there, so that the radio is automatically going to show that, or you can go back to that. You can set it to go back to a default. And then the last thing out of those 5 was alternative frequencies. So what happens if you only have one transmitter, one frequency? Well, you put that frequency in there so that the radio knows. I don't even need to tune. So I know that this is the only frequency that I should be looking at. But if you have translators, go ahead and put more frequencies in there. So we've just gone through. We've programmed the PI, the PTY, the PS, the radio text, and the alternative frequencies. And I think we did it as faster than I'm talking right now. So pretty easy. Station playlist. Last year, Kevin gave a demonstration on station playlist. That was the first time I'd ever seen it. After the conference last year, we got together over the phone, and I said, I'd like to see if we can make this work. He was great, helped me out, and we got it working. So how many people here use station playlist? Can I see hands? Okay. Anybody use anything else? Anything different? A couple? Okay. All right. There's other automation systems out there that work well. Just about every automation system has some mechanism within it that's set up to send metadata to an RDS encoder, also to send it to your website. So whether you have station playlist or not, every automation system I think has it. But this is how you set up station playlist. So you go to options, now playing, and then your stream metadata tab right there. And Ron's got it set up so he's sending data out to his website and update that. But this is the part that we want to look at. We want to output via TCP UDP. That's just some protocols for sending data over a network. That's all you need to know about that. We set it up for TCP. We put in our IP address. Remember, we gave the encoder a static IP address so it would never change. So we put in the IP address right there. And then the port number is 10,001. That's just a default number that our RDS encoder goes to. So that's what you need to set up right there. The next thing you need to do is set up what's called a template. And this is how data will get sent to the radio, in what format. So we put in here DPS, so it's going to send it to the PS field, the dynamic PS field, and then there's an equal sign, and then a %n. What in the world does %n mean? Well, if you look in the help list, the drop-down from station playlist, %n right here means song artist dash song title. If the output of the title is blank, the hyphen in between the two will not output. So what we're doing is we're setting up a variable. So we're going to actually be sending to the encoder DPS equals, and then the artist dash song title. That's what station playlist is going to do. If we wanted to do some different things, we could always break those up. We could put %A, %T in there with some extra words and make a template. That's all we're doing. So we decided to put in DPS equals WXMB because we thought, yeah, let's put the call letters on the station or on the radio every time you get a new message. So we put the call letters there, and then we said a dash %n. So does this look familiar? Everybody familiar with that? You've got your whole log of what your schedule is going to be putting out, and then what's happening right now is highlighted. So if we zoom in a little bit, you can see that this is what Ron was talking about. You want to have things that make sense here. I'll show you the next slide. This, for instance, if we were right here, it would say WXMB and then plum dash God help me. And that would look fabulous on the car radio. That would look really nice. Because plum is going to fill in where the artist is, and God help me is going to fill in where the title field is. So in that %N, that's what it's going to do. Some of these other things, WXMB sponsors and then Renee Holder, okay, that's going to get transmitted on RDS. And so you're going to want to look at things like that and say, I need to rename these. I need to come up with some good convention for being consistent so that that information isn't transmitted. Or the one right here, that means something to Ron. Doesn't mean anything to me. And it probably doesn't mean anything to the user or the listener. So you want to really scrub through your artist and title listings and clean them up.
Station playlist, though. That's part, yeah, because ours, it's different. We have different categories.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
So, but that's just a
Okay.
peculiarity of that particular.
Okay.
But I will say the shorter the duration is, it doesn't show that.
Okay.
I need to do a test on the length, but I don't even think it's 30 seconds. So even of the spots that we're showing, right now, I've only seen just music and program actually teaching.
Okay.
scrolling.
Okay.
So it's not doing our liners or top of the hours.
Okay. Great. Super.
Station playlist, there is a way you can change that to set a minimum time to display data.
There you go.
Fabulous. Talk to Kevin afterwards. All right. Super. Well, you want to make your list make sense. So the naming convention. So this is the way that it's going to show up on the RDS encoder. In the PS field, it's going to show WXMB. And what the RDS encoder will do is it will take that string, WXMB dash plum dash God help me, and it will try to break it up into nice 8-character sections so that words fit together nice and you don't have just words breaking in weird places, because they will. But this is how it's going to show this. WXMB, plum, God help, because it can get 2 words on there in 8 characters, and then me. So that's how it's going to show up. And that's all based on how your template is set up. Maybe you want to set up your template so it says DPS equals WXMB, now playing, plum, God help me. Or maybe you want to say God help me by plum. You could do that. So you can make all those changes, but you do it all in the template section right there. And it's real easy. Once you set the template, you can go back to the encoder, or you can look at an RDS radio and see what changes you made. And as long as you don't say anything terrible, nobody's going to mind. You're just playing with it to see what it looks like. I talked about on older car radios, they only showed the 8-character field, the PS field. So this is on General Motors cars and Chrysler cars from 2000 to 2010. Generally, they just showed the PS field, which is the 8-character field. So in my head, Jason Deru, you would have that showing each word would pop up there. Or on the Chrysler, it'd say Pearl Jam, something like that. On newer radios, you've got a whole lot more real estate, and so whatever the manufacturer decides to show, you're going to see. So up here, we see this top field that says top 40. Anybody tell me what RDS field that is? PTY, program type, right. So this radio shows the program type. Okay, then it also shows 93Q. What field is that? PS field, okay? Program service, right. And then last, it shows a longer, up to 64 characters, and that's going to be your radio text field. So when you're looking at this and you have things populating in different areas, you're going, okay, all right, that's the PTY, that's my format code. That's my PS field, that's my radio text field. So you need to remember what those different fields are. On this radio, can you tell me what Keisha is up here? The PS field, all right, that's the 8-character field right there. And then down here is your radio text field. So that's how it's displayed on this radio.
Question about that?
Yeah.
Certain stations in that first field at the top, the 103.3.
Uh-huh.
That's probably to the Subaru radio you got there. That seems to change depending on how they have it set up. Sometimes I see a station name in there, I see calls, sometimes I see programming.
It's all dependent on the radio itself and how the radio decides to display the data. That's one of the tricky things about RDS data is that you're sending data out and it's consistent, it meets the specification. But how the radio manufacturer decides to display that information is totally up to them. So it's sort of like using different web browsers. You know, things come in different ways if you look at Chrome or Firefox or Explorer. And so you want to look at a bunch of different radios when you're doing things and see how they actually display that data. This is how iPod and iPod Mini and the Nano display, again, the PS field up here and the radio text being broken up down there. Actually, that's the radio text also. So I've got some examples from Spark Radio. It's a small table radio. You can buy it on Amazon for 99 bucks. And so this is what it looks like when you are not broadcasting RDS. Okay. Okay, it just shows the frequency and that's it. All right. Now we're doing a little bit more with RDS. We're actually sending out a PI code. So WXMB shows up on the radio faceplate. All right, now we're going to populate the PS field, the program service name, and just put on there Calvary Chapel, Myrtle Beach. So there we go. So that's just a static display. It's not changing. As far as this radio, there's not even an automation system hooked up to it, doing any dynamic updates from song title or artist information. Now we're going to get a little bit fancier and we're going to put in some dynamic PS data. And you can see how it shows up on the radio faceplate.
To a dark and formless world, your light was born. You spread out your arms over.
All right, so that's how it can appear on the radio faceplate. The next thing, we're going to put in a PS, or program service name, and we're going to change that. It's not going to be static, and also the radio text field. So you can see different uses of RDS and how it's going to display on this radio. So why implement RDS? It's easy to set up. Believe me, it's easy to set up. It identifies your station. It identifies the music in the program that's playing right then. Like Ron was saying, what's that pastor's name? I've heard him before. I can't remember his name. Where is he in the scripture? What's he saying? You can just identify your music in your program. It connects with listeners. And it's less than a box of t-shirts, all right? It's not that expensive to do. Whether you do a fully dynamic encoder or whether you just turn it on in your transmitter, most transmitters nowadays have at least a static RDS encoder built into them. So you should be doing it. There's just no reason not to do it. So, any questions?
It's already on.
Thank you. This is very helpful. From a programmer's perspective, could you talk a little bit about what we should be putting into when we're doing our encoding as far as, artist, title, that sort of thing?
I think Ron is going to have a session on that a little bit
We're going to do
later.
a little session on encouraging you, Josh, and anybody else, Tony Clark, if you guys get his. We sent out an email to everyone, not you guys yet, because you were going to be here, to everyone that we have that is not a part of Genesis or his, giving them guidelines of what they need to have in RDS. And really it's going to be your pastor's name. And we weren't encouraging to say Pastor Ron, just Ron Dozler, boldly speaking, that's my radio program, / we don't need underscores, Josh, anymore. We'll talk about that. No more underscores. We don't need that because you don't have to have that in the metadata anymore. So it'd be a / then Matthew 5. That's it. As basic as that. So, name of the pastor, then his program / where he's teaching. It's really that simple. In fact, in the email I sent out, and if you want that, I'll forward it to you. There is a program that we use. It's a stamp program to help you do metadata even quicker, and it can do batch. So if you guys, we bring in programs by Radio Spider every night. That's just what we do. We don't bring it in through the week. It's every night. But if you guys are bringing in stuff during, a month or whatever, you could actually set up, if they haven't already done it, you can batch file them out. But you guys could do batches real easy on this program stamp. So that's what we're looking for guidelines. Later on, Rob will interject some stuff about guidelines as far as bit rate, but we'll get into that a little bit later. We were trying to get stuff a lot more consistent, but for your ends, we'll get you guys more info. Any more questions on RDS?
One more comment on data. If you're sending your metadata to the PS field, it's only 8 characters. So what happens when you send a word like afternoon to an 8-character field? Well, it's longer than 8 characters. So you're going to get the first 8 characters of that word, and then it's going to scroll across. That's how our encoder does it anyway. So you want to think about that, and you might want to just split that word after and noon so that it comes on after noon instead of jerking across the display. But you want to think about things like that. And the more you look at it, you'll go, oh, I need to go back and change that. Oh, I need to change that title or metadata. So, yes?
We've been using RDS for music and for teaching, but we've also been using it to engage underwriters. We offer underwriters 10-second billboards or 30-second spots. We've tuned station playlists so it will only show RDS information for things that are 25 seconds or longer. And when a 30-second spot comes on, we've titled it so it's the underwriter, for example, Quick Fill, and then sponsors Dove FM.
Great.
So that's been helpful for us to be able to engage our underwriters to get them to go from a 10-second billboard to a 30-second spot, knowing that on any RDS-equipped radio, they're going to, whoever's listening is going to see that message.
That's fantastic. Super, very good. Yeah.
Anybody else?
There's something else in our encoder, and I think most other encoder manufacturers have this also, is something called a scheduler. And so if you have, maybe you do a live somebody comes in and there's a DJ and they do, their hour of music or something like that, and they're playing CDs rather than music off a hard drive. You can schedule and you can say, okay, the name of the show is this. And you can just say every Saturday night at 5 o'clock, put that name of the show up for an hour and that's it. Or if you play beautiful music overnight or something like that, you could schedule so at midnight this RDS message comes on and then it just stays on until 5 a.m. or something like that. So your automation system doesn't have to do everything. You can schedule events, but having your automation system do it is obviously the best way of doing it. So, yes?
Yes, I was curious, if we use a microwave antenna to get the signal to the antenna, does it get transmitted through that?
It depends. The question was about a microwave antenna. If your microwave is something called a composite microwave, then you can use the RDS encoder at the station. If it's just transmitting the audio, just basic audio, then you would need to have this at the transmitter site.
Derek, ours is used through the microwave. So what you saw there is, ours is microwave. So
Yeah,
there's,
so the composite signal goes out to the transmitter.
there's one other cool feature that we set up, which is, I think we set it up after 25 minutes. We didn't talk about, there's no slide about that, but after 25 minutes, because most of our programs are 26, right? After 26 minutes, it puts on a default the tagline of the station, the word and worship for the Grand Strand. So every half-hour block, they're getting that tagline at the end, and then it'll come on the next, right? Our filler will be a song or something else, and then that'll start scrolling, which is kind of cool. So for 25 minutes, they're going to see the scrolling of that program, but that last minute, they're going to see WXNB, the word and worship for the Grand Strand. Very cool, and that's all in the system.
Yeah, where that comes into play is you have the RT, the radio text default, and right now it's set for 0 minutes right here, but you can set that, like Ron said, you can set that for 25 minutes. So what that does is after 25 minutes, if it doesn't have any updated data coming to the encoder, then it will just put up the default message, which you've already entered in there. And that's the reason for putting the default in. Having a default message with a timeout is really important. What happens if you lose your network connection to the transmitter site, or something happens and your generator is responsive to what data is being sent to it? You're not going to have the last song from yesterday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon displayed there. The generator will automatically go, hey, I haven't got any data. I don't know why. It doesn't matter to me, but I'm going to put up my radio text default, or your PS default in that case. So yeah, always a good idea to put the default in there. Give it some time that is going to work so that it's not there. The last message is stuck for a day or two. Any other questions? Yes. Oh, Ron's going to grab a mic.
Hi. So we have two stations with two separate sets of call letters, but we simulcast the same programming to each station.
Okay.
Is it possible to make one of those stations an alternative frequency to the other, or is that only for translators from one transmitter source?
That's a good question. There are mechanisms within RDS, and it's within your PI code, where you can say this is broadcast on another station, and it would think it was a translator station, even though it has its own unique call letters. But the PI code is going to be such that the receiver will recognize that as the same PI code. So it's a little bit more complicated, but there's information on how to do that, so it can be done. Yeah. Anything
No
else?
more questions? Thank you, Ben. I appreciate that. So they're going to be running a conference special on their equipment. So they have a booth set up, and obviously he's going to be doing another session on audio processing. So I encourage you guys to look at their equipment. But just remember, most transmitters have the ability, Nautel, but you need the newest update. In fact, they had an update that they had to roll back because it didn't work well. Everybody had to roll back to the old one, remember that? And we were supposed to have scrolling RDS with Nautel, but it still isn't all figured out yet. Right now, we can help you if you have Nautel. We can put the static in there. I know how to do that for you guys. We can, and so does Kevin. We can remote into your transmitters and at least get your RDS up that you would have, like us, WXMB/FM, so we can get that going for you if you need to. But really, far as easeability and a guide that isn't technical as much, right? Putting it in 15 minutes, it was done, and now you've got the, yes, Kevin?
Mine's actually scrolling.
Yours is scrolling, so there you go. So Kevin's got his Nautel scrolling. I know Curtis and I were trying to work on that last year, and we just didn't get it running. But so you can talk to Kevin, or this equipment is real easy with the web interface to talk to it. So.